All right, good evening, everyone. It's 1 minute to 5 here. We'll get the committee of the whole meeting started for June the 19th. Called meeting to order that this committee of the whole meeting be called at 5 p.m. Land acknowledgement statement. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Shinnebec, the people of Three Fires known as the Ojibwe, Odawa, and the Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited the lands and in time immemorial. And further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit whose ancestors shared these lands and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. Approval of the agenda. I have a recommendation here. We're going to change it slightly, but recommendation reads that the order of business be amended to consider COR 2024-022 short-term rental accommodations and licensing framework immediately following the delegations, and that the agenda be approved as amended. I need a mover and a seconder. Council Winters, Mayor Carleton, discussion. Councillor Colburn, question.
Thank you, Mayor Chair Pringle. Sorry. I would like if council would support this to address date setting for strategic planning meetings as a quick discussion, and in particular the November strategic planning budget session. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I add that then just to new business? And just need a motion to change the agenda. I need it. Okay, we can need a mover and a seconder to change that. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Day. Call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. We'll add that to new business. All right. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Does any declarations of pecuniary interest arise today? See none. If there is any at any time, you may bring it up as it comes. Announcements. Does any member wish to make an announcement? Mayor Carleton.
I would like to just thank staff who did all the work to put the event yesterday at Grey Roots together, and to be there for over 4 hours working on having that all together, on speaking to all the residents that came in. And I think it was wasn't as well attended as our first one, but it was certainly well appreciated by the residents who did make the effort to come out there yesterday and to talk and get answers to things. So thank you to staff for that.
Very good. Yes, Councillor Day.
In a similar vein, thank you to the staff and constituents who opened their homes on Sunday for the Greener Homes Tour. There was a great buzz around the community regarding solutions to reducing climate impact, and a lot of the folks who came out had very specific questions about what solutions they might implement in their current plans for their new builds. So I think it was a very successful day.
Perfect. Thanks. Any others? Not seeing any. Very good. Public hearings. We're going into a public hearing here. Recommendation reads that the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole be recessed to hold a public hearing for zoning bylaw amendment application Z02-24 for Mark Mitchell and Sarah May Taylor. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Day, Councillor Winters. Discussion. Call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. All right. So 6.1 is DEV 2024-036 and Z02-24 for Taylor. This meeting has been called to consider zoning bylaw amendment application Z0224 for property legally described as concession 19, part lot 41, Keppel. Madam Acting Clerk, please advise the method by which notice was given to the public for the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Notice of this public meeting was given by ordinary mail to all property owners within 120 meters, 400 feet of the subject property by email to all the prescribed bodies on April 15th, 2024, posted at the subject property and posted on the Township of Georgian Bluffs website. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of Georgian Bluffs before the proposed zoning bylaw is adopted or passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Township of Georgian Bluffs to the local planning appeal tribunal. The person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Planner, please proceed with the review of the application. Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Application Z0224 was submitted concurrently with consent application B12 2024 that was approved by the Committee of Adjustment May 21st. This application for a zoning amendment proposes to rezone the severed parcel from the B1224 application from a potential development zone to a residential 1 zone to recognize the extent of the residentially occupied lands within the Kemble settlement. The remaining portion of the lands, the retained lands under the consent application, are actually outside of the Kemble settlement area and are zoned and designated as agricultural in our official plan and zoning bylaw. In terms of comments received to date, we circulated, as the clerk noted, notice of public hearing on April 15th, and comments were received from the Grey County Planning and Development Services Department on May 7th. Those comments provide in summary essentially that the proposed severance is to sever off an existing residential use and is not a lot addition. County planning staff note that if the agricultural lands were to be added as a lot addition to the secondary settlement area, it would meet the legal or technical reason requirements contained in the county's official plan, as the agricultural designation contains the existing dwelling septic system. As such, county planning staff believes there is sufficient merit in including the portion within the agricultural designation with the rest of the severance. Just as an aside, there's a very small sliver of agricultural lands that are included in the severed portion of the severance application. The county is essentially saying they do not have a concern with that small sliver of lands being rezoned from agricultural to residential R1. Further, the agricultural land use type will remain largely intact. County planning staff are of the opinion that there is not another option for consent, and the proposal meets the secondary settlement area requirements. Therefore, county planning staff have no concerns. Great Salvo Conservation Authority provided comments on May 13th, 2024, and they note that GSCA staff generally have no objections to the proposed consent and zoning bylaw amendment, as it's not anticipated to impact any natural hazards or regulated areas.
Thank you, Michael, for that. No members of the public registered with the clerk to provide comments in support or in opposition of the application. I do believe Ron Davidson is online, agent for the applicant, and is in attendance. Does any council have any questions regarding it? Sorry, Ron Davidson, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you.
Almost jumped over you.
Can you hear me okay, first of all?
Yep, we can.
Perfect, thanks. Yeah, I am representing the Taylor family who own this property. It's a very straightforward application. As Michael indicated, the Committee of Adjustment gave the severance application approval last month, and this was one of the conditions to have the lands rezoned in a manner that Michael talked about. It raised no issues from any of the agencies, as you heard, and none of the neighbors expressed any concerns. Again, it seems like a pretty straightforward application, certainly in my mind. That's all I have to say. I'll be happy to answer any questions should any come up.
Perfect. Thank you, Ron. All right. Does any council member have questions regarding the proposed application? Oh, Councillor Coburn.
We don't want Mr. Davidson to get away too easily, so I'll ask a question if I may. Grey County does make a comment regarding the property lying within an area that is influenced by highly vulnerable aquifers and are suggesting low impact development and infrastructure. So I imagine that is not going to be an issue with the proposal.
Yeah, it definitely would not be. Usually what would be a concern is if there's a different type of operation or a different type of land use on the property, maybe one where some type of a not so friendly, environmentally friendly material was being stored. But when it comes to a house and a septic system on a property, that's always been considered to be just fine in areas where you have a vulnerable aquifers.
Perfect, thank you. Any further questions? I am now going to call a vote on the motion on this decision. All those in favor? That is carried. All right, so whereas it has been demonstrated that the proposed application is consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the county official plan, and complies with the general intent and purpose of the Township of Georgia Bluffs official plan and zoning bylaw 2020-020. Now, therefore, subject to the review of comments arising at the public meeting, it is recommended that application Z0224 be approved and that the amending bylaw be forwarded to council for adoption. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Thompson, Mr. Colburn, discussion. See no discussion. I'll call all those in favor. And that is carried. Now I'll call for an adjournment of this hearing. I need a mover and a seconder. Mayor Carlton, Mr. Day, discussion. I'll call the vote. All those in favor. That is carried. This public hearing is now adjourned. All right, moving on to delegations and public question period. I am going to go to items not on the agenda first. Any person who wishes to appear before council regarding an item not on the agenda may make written application to the clerk by the Thursday preceding the meeting they wish to speak at. To register, it's www.georgianbluffs.ca/delegations or call at the clerk's office 519-376-2729. Extension 603, 7.2.1. We have speeding concerns on Ingalls Falls Road. Kathy Walsh, would you like to come to the mic there, please? And you have 10 minutes to comment.
I'm just here to address speeding on Ingalls Falls Road. I've lived in Ingalls Falls Road since 2018, and since the road reconstruction in 2020, it has made it very easy for people to drive excessively fast. The quantity of foot traffic, kids, pets, parents, strollers that walk our beautiful area is huge, along with the runners and bikers. They quite often utilize both sides of the road. Of the very narrow road. Ingalls Falls Road is used as a bypass around Owen Sound. The traffic on there is very heavy. I noticed a couple of weeks ago that they put the counting strips up. I have made numerous calls to the Township of Georgia Bluffs and the OPP. Township has said that a radar sign would go up in the spring fall of 2023. It has never happened. OPP has said that they would put a memo out requesting extra patrol. I don't see them. I've never seen them parked on the road. Although well aware of the problem, the reluctance to keep our area safe and implement traffic calming measures is very concerning. There's radar speed signs, the medians that go in the middle of the road to slow down. I don't know what is stopping putting up these. There seems to be some sort of reluctance. I talked to Rayburn in the spring fall of 2023, and she said, yeah, we're going to put them up, and it never happened. So I walk, I run, I bike. People are beeping at me. They're flipping me off. I have grandkids, pets. It's not a safe place for people to enjoy the beautiful area. So I just need to know what the reluctance is to provide a safe, slow road.
Right. Well, perfect. I appreciate the comments, sir. Al, could you like to speak to this? Thanks, Kylie.
I can provide some initial comments and then Niall, please jump in if you have anything. I can first add that we did connect with our bylaw enforcement officer regarding the speed signs earlier this afternoon. We're happy to evaluate if we can put the speed signs. And my only use of the word if is in recognizing the steepness of the surrounding area and the slope that we would be dealing with in placing the sign on there. If not the sign, then we also have black cat radars that we're happy to allocate to that section of roadway as well. Niall, do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing I'd briefly add to that is, and to you, Deputy Mayor Bringle, is the speed trailer requires a platform on which it can sit, and that's where the steepness and the narrowness of the road becomes a bit of a challenge. So trying to find a spot for the speed trailer to sit in is a little bit of a challenge. We purchased 2 Black Cat radar signs, which have a much smaller footprint, and so we would be able to allocate those. We've got a couple of roads to put them on in the first instance. The monitoring of speed, it's a 50-kilometer-an-hour road. The monitoring speed is the first step as part of the traffic calming approach. And so the center medians would be something that would be implemented if we did find that speeds were significantly elevated above the speed limit in that area. So, yep, we're still looking to see if we can get the trailer out there. If we can't get the trailer, we will get the Black Cats.
Good. Thank you, Noel. Thank you, Kathy, for taking the time to come in today. Thank you. So, Councillor Thompson.
So we've had, thank you for coming. Appreciate that. It's always a concern when you improve a road. What you've done is you will experience increased speeds, and that's something that is to be expected, but still unsafe. I mean, in the years that I've been here, this is always a really a fairly simple response in terms of we put this on the police board and we put this on the police board meeting and we put out our measures. So when we talk about the radars and things like that, well, why is this seeming to be a difficult list?
So for you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, as I understand it, not necessarily a difficult one. I believe the calls came in, and correct me if I'm mistaken, but I believe the calls came in late last year at the point of time we put the trailer away for the winter. So it would have had its last few locations back end of last year and gone away. I know that Brian has been out and looked to find a location for it for this spring. So we will try and get it out there.
So that was my confusion. Is it, are we in charge of putting that out, or do the police put that out?
We are.
So we put that out. So what about the police surveillance? Like I feel like we're saying, I mean, it felt like before we went to police board and we required it. I feel like now it's a little different, or it feels like our response is different.
Or go to you, Councillor Coburn and Mayor Carlton.
So right now we're in a bit of a kerfuffle with Police Service Board because the existing board is not meeting and has no authority, and the new total OPP board for Grey Bruce District isn't functional yet because the government hasn't given a way for us to provide insurance for that board. So we technically have 2 non-operational police boards right now, waiting for the provincial government to sort out the rest of the rulings on it. So we can't go to that board right now.
Follow up there, Councillor Thompson.
I was afraid I would hear that. And I know I've spoken twice, so I know I'm usurping my time, but I think then what we've done is we've highlighted where we have a hole between what used to be and what we conceive for the next. So I think we need a response of some sort. We need a step to take to say, so we understand we don't have the previous police board mechanism and we anticipate something different, but in the meantime, there's still real people and real cars and real roads. So I think we need to do something other than say, well, we bought those things, we should slam them out there. Like, I think we have to take a formal step.
Good response.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Bringle, very briefly in response, quite agree. There is a gap here. The formation of the new Police Services Board may require us to look at what our traffic calming policies are. But until that board meets for the first time, which we do anticipate happening in the not too distant future, but once that board meets, we'll have a little bit of a better understanding so that we can adjust our policies to meet that new setting.
Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chair Pringle. I just wanted to add some strength to Ms. Walsh's comments. I just live around the corner and I can to the fact that the traffic is very heavy, and as she has said, lots of cycling, lots of walkers, especially in the summer months, and it is unsafe. I would also say that this is not the first time this issue has been brought before council. Last term of council, I know a cyclist expressed concerns about safety as well. So I really feel like Councillor Thompson has likely said it all, but I really feel like we need to have some more concrete action. And I'm not sure that saying we're between police boards, correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor Carlton, I'm not sure that that's an adequate explanation, because although the boards are maybe not as functional as we'd like them to be right now because of the transition, I do believe we still have police services. So I wonder, is it appropriate, I'm going to turn to our clerk, Carly, is it appropriate for a motion from the floor, given that we're discussing this? I'm wondering if we could ask for a report to come back to council in a reasonable period of time so that this issue doesn't get lost in the shuffle. If so, I would make such a motion.
Yep, Carly. Oh, Court. Yep, sure.
Can I just jump in for 1 minute? Sorry. Councillor Coburn, you couldn't see me trying to jump into the frame of reference with my hand raised. So agreed that there can be a solid action item that comes out of this discussion, regardless of the status of the police services boards. We still do have the working relationship with the OPP, regardless of the status of the police services board. We maintain that as a staff team. The metrics that we've discussed here, being the speeding metrics of the Black Cat, the trailer, whatever that may be, that provides us with physical hard data to back up the concerns that Ms. Walsh has demonstrated here this evening. So not so much as I have speeding concerns. We can then demonstrate through data that there is actually speeding concerns that will then warrant an OPP presence within the area. So those metrics that we collect through these measures will be directly communicated to the OPP and thereby justify a heavier police presence on Inglis Falls Road.
Council Winters.
Thank you. All great conversations, and I was heading in the same direction there, that as a council, we can ask that a letter of support be sent to the local detachment inspector saying we've had concerns repeatedly. We have current concerns about the speeding, the lack of enforcement on the road. To further amplify, I think what's going on in the situation is, to me, it looks like sign pollution, all the no parking signs, not only on our road, but on the county road as well. I mean, a week ago, you couldn't see the no parking signs for cars parked up along Great Road 18 in the same vicinity of that intersection. So I think we can put it together. My motion would be that we as council ask staff to send a letter to the local inspector stating our concerns with enforcement and the speeding it. We are doing our part to get you the data that you need, but in the interim, we're letting you know that we have safety concerns.
Councilor Day.
This isn't appropriate. Do let me know. I do want to ask that this type of thinking and action be applied to other parts of Georgian Bluffs as well, so that we apply that level of action that we can take in the absence of the functioning police boards whenever we hear of or know of already a place where speeding concerns are in existence.
So through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, I think Councillor Winters and Councillor Coburn, without the requirement for a formal direction, I think we can reach out to the OPP board and raise this concern with them and echo the conversation that Ms. Walsh has already had with them. I think in regards to the other areas, so we do have an active speed enforcement program. So the trailer is routinely moved around the township in response to concerns that are brought forward to us as staff. So it is a trailer which is moved in response to concerns that we've either had or shared, or that we've had members of the public raise with us. We do now deploy, as was noted, the Black Cat radars. These are the go slow signs that both count number of traffic passes along an area and also highlight when you're going in addition to the speed in excess of the speed limit. So they are deployable, and we are deploying those as needed, again, in basis on where we are identifying concerns with the speed trailer, or where we have concerns which we can't address with the speed trailer. We're using those, and then all of that information is fed back up to the OPP. So we are covering the township as best we can, and I know that the OPP are indeed out doing active traffic control and enforcement. They were out down in the Balmy Beach area just last week. So there's regular ride checks and regular speeding checks that are being conducted across the township. Again, there are some limits as to where they can do them, so they can make sure they can monitor accurately and so on and so forth. So we are out there doing it, and as noted by Joint Street and other areas where we are finding those issues, we are taking progressive next steps to try and to address those within the means that the township has. So if anyone does have concerns around speeding, they are more than welcome to bring them forward, and we will try to address them as best we can. And again, as has been noted, although the OPP board and its position of transition has an impact on policies, it doesn't have an impact on the fact that we need to control speeding as best we can in our roads.
Thanks, Al. Further questions? And ask Carly here, do you have enough information to go forward here? Or do you want it brought back as a notice of motion at the end of the meeting? What's the motion? Well, you're good, you got direction? So you need to move in a seconder? Instruction, okay. Councilor Colburn?
I'm just wondering, sorry, Chair Pringle, what is the motion before us that we're asking for a first and a seconder for? I don't think we need a notice of motion. That's for something that's not appearing on the agenda. This is on the agenda, so we can certainly provide a motion right now without having to provide notice. But I think what I heard Niall say is that we don't need one because they're taking action. I just want to make sure that the report comes back to us so that loop is closed and everyone feels like it's been addressed and no one is left wondering if it's still hanging out there.
Yeah, no, for sure, 100%. Yeah, no, they mentioned that they've got the direction they need to move this forward. So we'll wait for the further report. Thanks, Kathy, for coming in. All right, back to 7.1 items on the agenda. Any person who wishes to appear before council regarding an item on the agenda shall make written application to the clerk by 3 p.m. the day of the meeting. To register, www.georgianbluff.ca/delegations or call the clerk's office 519-376-2729 extension 603. And we do have some delegations here tonight. I got Steve Skinner and Gary Buck on our CES 2024-014 private road maintenance grants. Steve and Gary, you guys have the floor.
Gary forgot his hearing aid, so it's up to me. Thank you very much, Al, for sending me the emails that we've kind of been falling back and forth for a few years now. And from what I've been informed so far with the road grant, Mallard Street, we've got a few questions. I'm not going to read this. Everybody else can read it. It's basically about the mechanics of it, and our fear, I guess, without seeing the actual detail of it, is a community such as ours. We've got 39 full-time and part-time residents there. Our fear is that we make the financial commitment and somehow we miss the boat. And all of a sudden, we've had to do this in the past, historically, go around and collect door to door. If you've ever had to do that, you don't want to do that. It's a very long, painful process. Anyways, so again, getting back to it, the basic mechanics of it. What's the process required to apply? I don't know. I'm going to just kind of reiterate these. If you can interject, feel free. Again, how do we guarantee we'll receive what we've been guaranteed? Is it going to be on a first come, first served basis? What timeline is required for the completion of it? And what I mean by that is, since we've got a unassumed road, and it's the spring and the fall that really kicks the heck out of it, and the winter does as well from plowing it. These are all costs that we as a community have burdened ourselves upon. We're just so we have it on the table and we're clear, we're not looking to get the road assumed. So it's just a little bit of financial help to keep the upkeep of it. The timeline of when it is going to be applied for, acknowledged that we can receive it if this does happen, and from completion, I didn't know if there was going to be a set timeline or that can be done on a calendar or annual basis, so we can use that throughout the whole year instead of just one time. And is it possible to get reimbursement for equipment that's already purchased that we borrow to do it? And maybe submit costs of the people in the community that that are actually doing the physical work of it. Is that possible? And then lastly on this one, does the request of this grant need to be done by a community or an individual, or just by community signatures? In ones that I've seen in the past in different communities, they've had an official, drawn a blank for the word of it, but kind of a registered committee. I hope that's not the case, because that's really an obstacle in itself for a community to come across. A petition of signatures, that petitions may be the wrong word, but just a sheet of all the signatures of all the people that are willing to say yes to get a grant if it's approved. And does the size of the community determine the amount of money that's approved? If the said budget is, say, $20,000, is a community of 5 or 6 people allotted the same amount of money as a community of 40 people? Is there a balance there? I don't know. And again, I guess getting back to the full year of it, I like to use this as a comedic sort of thing, is a slush fund over the winter months to have, and like maintenance on equipment to maintain the road for safety. We're having more full-time residents down there, so we've got more heating trucks, heating oil, propane trucks, construction trucks, good old Amazon delivery vehicles, and basic people that, I'll be quite honest, don't know how to drive up a hill in the wintertime. To maintain that, would these funds be available for that? And lastly, I guess for the out-of-pocket expenses, what would be the expected turnaround time? 30, 60, 90 days immediately upon completion? Or is it an annual submit the amount of money and get reimbursed? those little mechanics, they can make a program be a success or be a failure. Oh, lastly, out of the 39 residents that I talked to, and we've got a few empty lots that people own as well. It's a fair amount of tax dollars. We've got the garbage running down that road in the summer months, which is a benefit. Not so much in the winter, but it's good exercise to get up the hill. Anyways, I want to thank you. In the last thing, we do have all the people's names, addresses, phone numbers available if that's required.
Thanks, Steve, for the presentation there. I know probably 80% of the questions you asked, you've got coming up in the report here later on tonight.
Awesome.
Yeah, so
Awesome.
as you're grabbing like a one, I read that.
Okay.
So I think we can answer a lot of your questions later on here tonight on that piece, and appreciate you coming in to present to us.
Beautiful.
Did council have any questions for Steve Boyce? Oh, okay.
Great.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
All right, next up is Heather Barfoot for COR 2024-022, short-term accommodations and licensing framework.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I was going to say, thank you, everyone. I think my situation might be similar in that I'm going to be staying around for the discussion about the actual bylaw. So, so my questions may be, or concerns may be addressed then already. Oh, how much time do I have?
Well, I'd like to say 5 minutes, but we'll give you the time you need.
Thank you. Okay. All right. I'll try to keep as close to the 5 as I can. I know in the past, I haven't always done that, but I am trying to this time. The first thing I wanted to address in the bylaw itself, under the general provisions, section 9, there's an item 10, and it reads like this. No person shall, while occupying or operating an STRA, contravene any bylaw of the Township of Georgian Bluffs or any provincial or federal statutes or regulations or orders made pursuant to the foregoing. I guess the point I want to make about this is I think we have to start with the assumption that STRA owners are competent adults and citizens of not only the municipality, of the province, of the government of Canada. Owners and their guests recognize that they are not in a law-free zone when they are in an STRA. And that seems to be the assumption here, is that somehow we need to be directed, that we have to obey the law. Everybody knows that, but everybody does, right? So I'm asking whether that's a necessary part of this bylaw and why it would be necessary. The second thing I wanted to mention, in the staff report, it's on page 77 of the information, the statement is made, it remains unclear from a legal perspective if STRA licensing programs are an appropriate use of municipal power. So there is a section in the report that addresses that. So my question is, how will this be determined? Is it perhaps premature to initiate a full licensing program for Georgian Bluffs before knowing if the right of the township to do so can be challenged? Citizens, the work that was done up to this point clearly identified that citizens wanted their concerns to be heard, and the current hotline provides a clear path for that and a process to engage owners in solutions. Tools are in place with existing bylaws to deal with noise problems, nuisance problems, etc. Fire, all of these things are already in place. Now that there is more clarity about the risk that the township will be taking on with licensing and with the expense to the township, is it the right move to say, now we need to move forward with a full licensing bylaw, or might it be appropriate to let them the oversight and measures that are already in place, the hotline, et cetera, actually let those things, see if that will address any of the concerns. So just putting that out there as an observation. The next thing I wanted to mention was the duration. The duration of the proposed license is January to December for 12 months. Some municipalities have a shorter duration option. This is a cottage rental, traditionally a cottage rental area where people have rented their cottages for a number of weeks in the high season, July, August, maybe end of June, maybe going into the first part of September for the long weekend, Labor Day weekend, but for a short amount of time. The current information is that there are roughly, have been counted about 154 total rentals that were counted. Only 50 of those or less, I believe, were year-round. So it seems to me that when it comes to that, there needs to be an option for those people that want to rent their cottages as they've been doing for, you know, many family cottages have been rented on a long before online platforms like Airbnb and so on came into effect. They were rented for years prior to that. And it seems to me there needs to be a lower cost, perhaps simpler licensing option for those people that want to focus their rental just in the high season in the summer so they can continue to own a family cottage and those kinds of things. The next point I wanted to make was around the license and suspension. This is section 7 of the bylaw. Given the level of detail that is outlined in the bylaw in general, the amount of information that STA owners need to be able to provide about through licensing and the additional requirements related to operations, there are sort of 50 things that I would, by my count, that are stipulated in terms of being able to be licensed at all or to operate on an ongoing basis. So as I was reading through all of those things, I was thinking, great, I'll tick off all those 50 things off a checklist of these 50 things. And I'll do all those things, be able to get my license, will be able to operate for a year. But then I read section 7, and it says that the issuer of licenses determines, it says the license may not be granted or may be revoked if the issuer of licenses determines that the location or operation of the STRA may create or has created a public nuisance. Second point, the issuer of licenses determines that the operation of the STRA is contrary to the public interest. So as an owner can go through the entire licensing process, provide all this information, be operating on a perfectly legal basis. And now we have this overriding sort of, now we're going to say the location's not right, or it's contrary to the public interest, and that seems to override the actual approval of that's been outlined elsewhere in the bylaw. Sorry, I'm not totally sure I'm absolutely clear about what I'm saying there, but it seems to me that this is adding an additional level that's not defined in the bylaw at all about what would qualify as a public nuisance, what would be the criteria for that. Location, as you'll recall, perhaps I was here for the meeting with the official plan because I was concerned. We had not talked about location. That was referenced in that presentation about the official plan. And that was never part of the discussion around STRAs, but I'm now seeing that word in the bylaw. What exactly does that mean? The other thing I wanted to just draw attention to, it's an item that I find confusing, is section 13 under orders. The term written warning is used related to the demerit system that is outlined. It may be that after once owners start going through the whole licensing process with the inspections that have to be done, et cetera, they may make a decision that they don't want to proceed to apply for a license. They want to withdraw or not apply for a license for that particular year. Does that mean that anything found in those inspections now becomes a legal requirement for that owner to complete whether or not they decide to go forward with an STA? So there are aspects in the bylaw that seem to say that that would be required, or if it was not done to the township's satisfaction or by a particular date, that it could actually be done by the township and charged back in taxes. So I want to be really clear about what exactly we are committing to in terms of entering into the licensing process. The last thing as well is section 12 about enforcement. There are a number of elements under here, but of course it says that an enforcement officer may at any time enter onto a property. There is no reference in that section to notifying the owner that a bylaw officer needs to visit the property or is going to visit the property. The reason I say I think that needs to be added is because what we would do immediately is notify a guest that someone is going to be coming to see whether the fire pit is being used appropriately, right? If I'm a guest, and somebody comes onto the property and says, I'm a bylaw officer and I'm here to look at X, and they don't know anything about that, it would be a very distressing thing for them. If they got a call from the owner ahead of time and said, we just had a heads up, this is what's going to happen, they'd be fine with that, right? So I do think that there needs to be a cooperative kind of approach when it comes to needing to visit these properties, particularly for properties where the owners are not on site. Of course, there are a number of STAs where the owners are on site, and that wouldn't be a factor for them, but it would be a factor for ones where the owners are not on site. All right, so that if there are questions for me, that's fine. Otherwise, I'll have a seat and just listen to the discussion after.
Yeah, thanks, Heather, for your comments and the concerns there on that too. So yeah, any questions from council right now? Nothing. That's it. Yeah, we'll be getting to this one here real shortly. So more for you. All right, next is Juan Marzelli, COR 2024-022, short-term accommodations and licensing framework.
Good afternoon, council members, deputy mayor, mayor. My name is Juan Marziali. I've been a property owner and resident in Georgian Bluffs for 7 years. I've been an STA operator. It'll be 3 years in August. During that time, I've welcomed over 1,400 people to Georgian Bluffs. I've hosted them and made them welcome in the area and tried to promote the area. I was part of the STA work group along with Heather. Some of the points are going to overlap what she said as well as far as concerns. I'm going to start with the point about the noise monitors that the township decided not to enforce those. However, I think it's important that the township consider establishing noise levels with regards to the nuisance bylaw, because some of us will want to install the noise monitors. And if there is a complaint, we want to be able to provide evidence that either, yes, there was no excessive noise, or no, there wasn't excessive noise. And it's not just a matter of he said, she said. I've worked with Brian He's been out to my place a few times. I respect what Brian does. I think we work well together, and I've been more than happy to do whatever he's told me to do. Some of the times when we've communicated, I've been 10,000 kilometers away, but I've addressed him as soon as possible and gave him security camera footage on occasions when there was a noise complaint, but it was just people talking in the backyard. So I sent him the video. I think it's important for us STA operators to be able to defend a complaint with actual facts and not just he said, she said. So if the township does establish a noise level, it would be important and helpful to us to know that, yes, there's too much noise or no, there isn't too much noise. And it's not just an arbitrary thing. The second point that I'd like to discuss is with this proposal for the demerit points. I think it adds a level of complexity, a level of cost and effort that really, when I read the rest of the wording, this demerit point system doesn't really mean anything. Because as Heather pointed out, when you read the section 7 on page 87, under license suspension and revocation, says that the issuer of licenses may refuse an issued license and may suspend or cancel an issued license when 1, the applicant does not meet or has failed to meet the requirements of this bylaw or other township bylaws. So that means that if there's a nuisance bylaw infraction, they can automatically revoke the license. So all this demerit point system thing goes out the window because it doesn't matter. The other thing, I think it's one thing that's very important is that the township in going forward with this licensing program, it means something to the licensing to the township, it means something to the residents, but it should also mean something to the operators. When you issue a license for 12 months, it should mean that, we've done everything you've asked. We're going to operate under the law and you're going to honor our license for 12 months. So when you introduce wording like the second and third arguments which Heather also mentioned, that the issuer of licenses determines that the location and operation of the STRA may create or has created a public nuisance. And number 3, the issuer of licenses determines that the operation of the STA is contrary to the public interest. Those are things that you're more than welcome to address, but it should be outside of the licensing program. If council wants to ban STAs, that's something that they can, bring up. But if they've issued licenses, they should honor those licenses. So if they want to ban STAs, fine, but take the time that you did in implementing the licensing program to also say, no, we're done with STAs. If you issue a license, it should mean something. The next point is under the offenses and penalties. Again, when people come to Georgian Bluffs, they're on their holiday. They want to relax. They want to enjoy. They want their rights to privacy. I think that the licensing program shouldn't affect anyone's right to privacy or any property owner rights that any other citizen has. It shouldn't infringe on those. We operate under the law. You have your bylaws that we must adhere to, but the licensing program shouldn't withdraw rights that are available to any other resident or property owner. So, and again, working with Brian, and you've got this hotline set up so that people make a complaint on the hotline, we're notified within 1 hour, we have to do something about it. Okay, so we do something about it. We communicate with the guests, and all this is documented, on Airbnb or whatever platform it has to be. Because if there are problem guests, it needs to be documented for our protection and also for Airbnb's protection that, you know, these people need to be outed as bad guests. So we need documentation. We need to say, you know, we warned them about noise. The levels were above standards that are set. Then we were informed that the noise still persisted, but you have to let us know again that someone's going to come out there. You know, then we can document it. You know, they were warned, we were told them to keep it down. They didn't. So now the bylaw officer is coming. But not that the bylaw officer can just show up unannounced. I've had people in my STA, neighbors show up unannounced when guests are there, and I've had people break into the house when guests are there. Okay? And the guest wasn't happy, they were scared. Their impression of Georgian Bluffs was this place isn't safe because the neighbor broke into the house when they were there. Okay? And the police were involved. The OPP came out and they, you know, it's a resident that has a long history, family history in the area. So they had a talk with him, fine. But then after the talk, he comes back, destroys the mailbox, destroys the fire sign on the house. I have to call the police again. You know, it's, if my guests do things like what this person did, they would have been in jail. They wouldn't have had a nice talking to. Okay? So we have to realize if we're going to welcome people, we're hosts. We have to promote a positive experience. And we have to do everything we can to enforce that. You know, we have to make people welcome, not find a way to make them unwelcome, if that's what we want to do. So I think that them coming unannounced onto the property shouldn't be in the wording shouldn't be like that. You know, when I've worked with Brian, you know, if he had to come out, whatever, we say, okay, you're going to come out. And preferably, if you're going to come out for inspections or anything like that, it should be done at a time when guests aren't there, if at all possible. If it's related to the licensing and not to those particular guests breaking a bylaw, it should be scheduled outside of time when guests are there. And then the other wording here is that a person exercising power of entry on behalf of the Township of Georgian Bluffs under this bylaw may be accompanied by any person under their direction as deemed necessary. And then when I go to item 6.2, that they can inspect and remove relevant documents or things for the purposes of making copies or extracts. If they need to take a picture of something or if they need copies of something, we can happily provide it to them. But the wording here, for them to remove documents or things, things can be anything. They can take the furniture if they want. You know, you have to be careful with some of this wording. I work well with Brian, but who knows when Brian's not here and somebody else doesn't want to be so cooperative. They decide, well, we're coming in and we're taking your furniture. You agreed to it because you got a license. That's not right. Then under section 13.4, with regard to orders, in the event of a default of such work being done, the officer shall direct the work to be done at the owner's expense and the Township of Georgian Bluffs shall recover the expense in the same manner as municipal taxes. This is licensing STAs. It should be, your power should be limited to revoking that license. You have other options and other, you know, orders and bylaws and everything else that isn't part of the licensing program, that you don't need to put stuff like this into this licensing program. Okay? Because, you know, if I'm a layman and I read this, it could be the officer decides that that, I should have solar panels on my house, or that my house is unsafe. So let's call a demolition crew and demolish the house. I know I'm being extreme, but under this wording, what's to say? As I've been doing this for 3 years, coming on 3 years. When I read that point, I have to think long and hard. Do I want to continue welcoming people to Georgian Bluffs or not? If that's written into the licensing program. The last thing that I'm going to say is it's a trivial thing, but to me, like, I know you have this hotline and it's great. It's fine. No problem. And all the frameworks that we worked in the work group with Niall, I have no problem with any of it. But when I go to Georgian Bluffs website, as soon as I go there, I get a pop-up window that says, this is the number for the hotline if you want to complain. I don't get a pop-up that says, welcome to Georgian Bluffs. It says, you want to complain? Here's the number. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be out there, but I'm saying, say a guest wants to find out about Georgian Bluffs because maybe they like their stay so much that they want to find out about the place, and they go to the website. The first thing they see is, you want to complain about people coming here? Here's your number. It pops up right in front of you. It's just not a good look. I'm not saying that it's not important. It's very important. But I'm saying you don't have to plaster it right out there as the face of your website. That's it.
Thanks, Juan, for your comments, sir. All right. No questions for Juan while we had him here. All right, we'll move on to the next part of what we're going to discuss on short-term accommodations. So 9.3, corporate services, 9.3.1, COR 2024-022, short-term rental accommodations licensing framework. Recommendation reads, whereas by way of resolution COW 2023-150, council directed staff to prepare a licensing program to regulate short-term rental accommodations throughout the township, and whereas staff have developed a draft program in consultation with the township risk management and legal teams. Now, therefore, committee hereby support the draft short-term accommodations license framework as appended herein, and that a bylaw to formalize the licensing framework to be presented for enactment in Q3. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Winters. Brittany, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So let me just start by saying I was very vigorously making notes while our delegates were speaking. So I do apologize if I don't answer all of your questions. But with that caveat, this is simply the first draft of the bylaw. So I'm happy to take any feedback that council has this evening, in addition to that we have heard from our community members. You are by no means putting the final stamp on this bylaw this evening. There's various iterations and various drafts that can be brought forward should we decide that any amendments are necessary. So to begin, I'm just going to provide a little bit of a background, and then we're going to get into kind of the meat and the potatoes of the bylaw. So how did we get here? Our delegates have touched upon the community feedback engagement sessions and group that was created in 2023 to gauge both community feedback and operator feedback in creation of the draft licensing program that you see in front of you this evening. I and our legal team have consulted the various notes and directions from that committee in drafting the regulations you see before you this evening. In December, upon conclusion of that feedback, of collection of that feedback, council gave formal direction to create the licensing framework, which we have done per the update that you received earlier this spring, being in April of this past year. Since then, we have implemented the 24/7 hotline, and I will say the pop-up on the website was simply a promotional informational tool. I'm happy to take that down, so thank you for that feedback, Juan. I'm happy to just incorporate it to the STA page now that we've had it up and running for a while. So the hotline, this is worth spending some time on in recognition of the concerns that we've heard from our delegates this evening. It went live on the 17th of May, so that preceded the Civic long weekend. Is that right? The Civic? No, that's the Victoria Day long weekend, is it? Thank you. My apologies. So it went live that Friday. We have only received 2 calls to date to that line. They both came in on that Saturday. They were both about the same issue and about the same property. The hotline is correlated to the responsible person requirement within this licensing program that we'll get to in our next slides, in that each owner can either be the representative for their property or can appoint a responsible person to do so on their behalf. Each concern that is relayed through this hotline is reported to every owner or responsible person. The owner or responsible person is then required to act upon that concern within the first hour of receiving it. As part of the licensing process, we do collect contact information for both the owner and or the responsible person. The owner and or responsible person can deem how they wish to respond to the concerns. In recognizing it's only an hour window that we provide, I by no means, and the bylaw does not set the expectation that the owner or responsible person be on site within that hour. It's simply communicating with the guest that we've received a concern, and communicate it to your guest. How are we going to remediate it? If it is not remediated within that hour, that is when the township becomes involved. I have framed this tool, and I hope our operators will see it the same way, as a tool to better keep our operators and owners informed of issues at their property, so we don't have to get to the demerit point system that the bylaw presents. But with that being said, it is the basis and the foundation of a bylaw that we have to encapture every scenario that we could eventually be met with, and have metrics as to how to deal with those concerns. So while I can appreciate that, the bulk of our operators already comply with existing regulations, this framework does give us the groundwork to deal with those that don't, and to deal with the issues that will present itself. I'll leave it there. So with that, we'll get into our licensing program. As you'll see in the report, Granicus has identified approximately 154 properties that operate currently or operate at some point during each year as a short-term rental accommodation. 52 properties were listed upon my authoring of the report you see this evening. And when we get into the overall application process and further to our delegates' comments, the licenses are proposed to be valid for an annual term. I can appreciate and get behind the idea of a seasonal license. We would have to look at the fees that are then built in. The thought behind an annual basis is it gives both operators and staff the ability to collect applications and issue licenses before we get to the peak season every year. So that gives us January through, let's say, May, to have all applications received and back out the door and ready for the peak season every year. So that was the thought behind annual licensing processes. And it's also cleaner from an accounting perspective, in that license fees are applicable for an entire year. They're not broken down for shorter terms. So with that, we'll get into the meat and potatoes of the proposed bylaw. So I'm going to move section by section. Our conversation will look the same as the bylaw, as in we will move section by section as is presented in front of you this evening. So the proposed bylaw is appended to the staff report that you see. I have spent copious amounts of time learning legalese, talking to our legal, I'm not even going to say the word learning, asking them their feedback to the proposed regulations. They have redlined this and redlined it again. So what you see in front of you is their best recommendation as we move down this line. I've also spoken in detail with our risk management teams, being our insurance representatives, because as noted in the report, in accomplishing this licensing framework, we do assume liability. We discussed in April that you will assume liability either way. We just have to decide in which way we would like to assume liability, meaning you assume it if you don't have a licensing program, you assume it if you do. So either way, as the township, we do assume liability as far as Airbnb or short-term accommodations goes.
Oh, sorry, Councilor Thompson.
Sorry, I don't know if my question is to the chair or to Brittany, but do you want questions as you go or save them up to the end?
I'm happy for either. If you have a question now.
Two-part question. And this is really to my colleagues. Like, do we need to go line by line? Like we've read this. Do we go section by section? Whatever, or what do you think? I'm just trying to save you going through the whole.
I think in total I have about 8 slides.
Okay.
So I'm being exaggerant. I think.
Okay. I was just trying to make it easier on you. We've all read it.
Okay. If I'm getting too in the weeds, please stop me. I'm happy to be more high level if needed. So as I've mentioned, this bylaw and the staff report incorporate the feedback of the 2023 group that was created. And you see that in inclusion of the good neighbor acknowledgement. Now, I do acknowledge, further to that word, that the schedule simply holds the space for the acknowledgement in that depending on what the bylaw looks like is what the acknowledgement will look like, because we do have to incorporate sections of this bylaw directly into the acknowledgement. But that was a key theme out of 2023, being that we want to continue the collaborative nature between operators and the community rather than inspiring a divide, which is by no means the intent of this bylaw. So we first move through the application requirements, which there are many per our delegates. And I did receive Ms. Barfoot's suggestion for a checklist. That is absolutely, definitely something we will take under consideration and work into the application process as we move through this. I've already touched on the requirement for a responsible person. That person does have to be 18 years of age and has to be available to respond to concerns received to that hotline or to whatever avenue within the first hour. And further to that, every owner is only able to have 3 properties that operate as an STRA within the township of Georgian Bluffs at one time. The inspections formed part of both the bylaw and the feedback that we've heard from our couple delegates this evening. I want to clarify that the inspections are only required and only applicable to short-term accommodations. They are not then retroactively enforceable if you move beyond the STRA licensing process. With that being said, the inspections are an annual requirement because we are required to ensure that the buildings or dwelling units are safe for habitation. We have to ensure that the safety of the occupants is prioritized. And not only that, from a liability perspective, it at least assists the township in minimizing the liability that we are taking on by consenting to the use of private dwellings for this use. So we are required to do so on an annual basis. And I have made the distinction. We cannot, by inspection of an STRA, require a home to come up to 2024 building standards. That is not the intention here. We are not going in as a quote building inspection. We are going in to ensure the safety of the building, the literal structural safety of the building prior to giving our consent to its use. Which brings me into my demerit point system. So one thing that I read clearly in the notes of the previous community group or the working group was that, and something that was further honed in by our legal team, equity in the program, equity in responding to by law enforcement complaints. So the demerit point system, in the eyes of those 2 caveats, gives us the ability to first prioritize an education-based enforcement system. So the first time or the first few times that we receive a complaint, we do not automatically fine you. We do not automatically penalize you. This is a new system. And I know that both Brian and I, being heavily involved in enforcement, are very happy and ready to take an education first approach to this while we all get accustomed to it. So by virtue of the demerit point system, it applies a progressive discipline methodology to enforcement of these concerns. So with that being said, the written warning carries a lighter demerit than that of the official offense through the courts. And not only that, it establishes grades. So, your first offense does not automatically require revocation of your license. We progressively get there through our progressive discipline methodology. Do I need to spend time going over the specifics of demerit points? Do we have questions about the demerit point system? No. I will note that they are all outlined in the schedule, being the proposed amounts. They are to a 15-point maximum. You'll note that some of the offenses through the court system carry an automatic 15-point suspension or revocation. They are tied to properties, not owners. So each owner is able to have various demerit points applied to various properties. Yes.
That was one place I had a question. The explanation or justification about why it's property-based instead of owner-based.
Simply, again, going back to that equity, I have been using this word called halfway happy, in that I am attempting to be equitable to our operators while also minimize our liability, minimize the responsibility to the township. Responsibility is the wrong word, minimize the risk to the township. In providing operators the ability to continue to host as many people as 3 properties will permit, I do not wish to approach this through a penalty eyes as we apply it to owners. I think in approaching fairness and equity throughout this program, it would be my recommendation that we do it property by property rather than owner, because it may be one bad group that spoils it at one property, not the operator, if that makes sense. Kind of.
And I know this may not make me popular. I would like to see us go through this reasonably in depth. And my reasoning is, as council, we may have read the whole report and understand it. I would think we have a lot more public probably watching this meeting, trying to get some answers on it. And I think the more questions we can answer for them here in this level, the better. And this would be the proper time to do it.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. So the demerit point system was inspired first by trying to find a way to, again, prioritize that equity piece. So simply receipt of a complaint does not immediately become a punitive nature or immediately warrant an investigation. So the demerit point system, I don't want to say disregards complaints, but gives us the basis to first educate, second, provide the written warning, and third, then prioritize an actual court-backed offense if necessary. And in doing so, let me just get to that section. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. Okay, so the demerit points are set out in Schedule B. First, the license may be suspended for a period of 6 months if the total demerit points equals 7. And again, I'll highlight the word may. It may or may not be. A license will be revoked if you are, if your total gets to 15 within the first 12 months. And the demerit points will remain in place for 2 years or upon transfer of ownership of a particular property. Now, we did spend a lot of time under the suspension and revocation section, being our delegates, specifically with the public nuisance or the location of. And my comment to that would be, that is a safeguard for the township. That is not the foundation of the program. The foundation of the program is equity. The foundation of the program is entry to all. We are not here to create barriers to this program. We're here to create safety for this program. It is not our automatic or our suggested approach to deny a license. We are here to work collaboratively with the owners and collaboratively with the neighbors to ensure that everyone is, quote, halfway happy with this program. Now, with that being said, I'll spend some time going through the demerit point system and, oh, sorry, thank you. 2 hours. So Schedule B, oh, sorry, yes.
Just when you're talking there about the license suspension and revocation, I think one of the concerns was that the township could come in and the issuer of licenses could just change their mind midstream and change that. I think a lot of that is in there as part of the application process, and it would only be revoked if there were sufficient concerns to necessitate that it wouldn't suddenly be determined that you're a public nuisance, so we're going to shut you down. So all of that would be taken into consideration while the application is being processed through the application process.
Absolutely, 100%. And when we consider the demerit points, and you'll have to forgive me, I'm getting ahead of myself in my slides, but we also have built-in appeal mechanisms. Again, on the basis of equity and the basis of ensuring entry for all. Move on to my next slide. So as I mentioned, the first mechanism for appeal is the CAO. The second mechanism is the appeal committee. Now, I'm suggesting that be established as a tribunal rather than just a basic committee. When and through the tribunal system, the decisions are unappealable. They are final. They are not appealable to this council horseshoe. It is my recommendation that that committee be made up of one elected official from this horseshoe, operators of STAs within the community, and community members throughout Georgian Bluffs. As part of their ability to impose remediating actions, the committee will have mechanisms built into their terms of reference. For example, the noise monitoring devices that were previously discussed. Should, for example, a property be at 7 demerit points in relation to the noise and nuisance bylaw, the appeal committee may require that owner to install noise monitoring devices as a remediating action.
Just going to hold you there for a second, Brittany. I see Councilor Colburn, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair Pringle. I do have a few questions about the appeal process, Brittany, if that's okay with you. I am not at all convinced that makeup of the committee is going to be helpful. I would think that the folks you want to bring to that committee or that appeals board ought to be as free from bias as is humanly possible. So I'm curious to know, is that makeup involving short stay accommodation operators a common element in the formation of such an appeals board? Is that how other communities around us select their members? I am not at all convinced that that's a good idea. I would rather have a board of completely unrelated attitudes regarding STAs so that that appeal process is untainted and as objective as possible. So that's my first question. I'll just stop there.
Thank you for the question. In recommending that, I will say I can't comment if that is the practice of our neighboring communities. I simply included it to, in my view, remove any type of bias. If we have operators, we have an elected official, and we have community-based citizens, then we have all perspectives at the same table. And that was simply the frame of mind that I was working from. But I'm happy to take feedback otherwise.
I think we just need to be really careful. I know one of the criticisms of the working group that I heard was that some of the community members were brought biases possibly to the table as well, in that are they frequent STA users and are they not? I guess I just caution that an appeals board needs to be extremely unbiased, and I don't see that current makeup is going to get us there. But I will leave that for now. There is a comment in the report on page 7. I'm just wondering, how are the complainants made aware of the results of an appeal? Will that be in writing, or how is that loop going to be closed?
Absolutely in writing, yes.
Okay, thank you. And further on page 7 of the report, 7 of 12, it talks about I think it's in relation to the hotline, and that a complaint can be, the recording of the call will be sent to the owner of the short stay accommodation in the township. Am I reading that right? It sounds to me like that could be, I mean, if the person's voice is being recorded and sent on, would that not be a potential violation of privacy if that individual's voice could be recognized, or am I misinterpreting that altogether?
You are correct in that the complaint is forwarded in both writing and the voicemail that is submitted. And I personally don't have any concerns with violation of personal privacy, only because the person that is sent the recording is the owner of the property, and thereby is entitled to that information.
Are they entitled to know who the complainant is, though? Because I think that will be a deterrent to folks forwarding complaints if they have concerns. And certainly if their voice can be recognized, I would think that would also be a deterrent. We're talking about small communities where a short stay accommodation is going to well know the voice of their neighbors, and that is of concern to me. I don't know if that's a concern for anyone else on council.
I'm happy to take that feedback back. That is simply the setup of the hotline, so I could inquire as to if we could investigate alternative options to forwarding the recording to the owners.
Okay, thank you. And that was it for me on the appeals process. Thanks, Britt.
Just before you go ahead there, Brittany, one, we can't take any questions from the floor right now. If you want to write your question down and submit it to Brittany here, we can get looked after it that way. Mr. Dave first, I do believe.
I think I had 2, but now I might have 3 quick comments. First, just on wording, I wonder about the benefit of saying STRA operators and non-STRA operators, as opposed to STRA operators and community members, because STRA operators are part of the community, and I would like that feeling to be had throughout this entire process.
Very good feedback. Thank you.
I agree with Councillor Coburn regarding the setup of the committee. I think when I've been pondering this, I've been thinking about how we need community members of whatever background who are interested in dispute resolution and helping communities come together and work towards a peaceful ongoing resolution. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're experienced with STRAs. It means they're experienced with people and disputes and resolution. And the voice recording, I have zero legal understanding to this, but I do know that when my call is being recorded, I normally get a warning about that or feedback about that before my call to Bell, or sorry, I shouldn't mention company, my call to a company is being recorded.
Comments, Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, I was going to lend some support to the idea, but I don't know that the makeup of that tribunal or committee might be the right one. I think we do want to avoid any even perception or optics of a bias, and so that's important. I don't have any knowledge about IT or the other, but I can appreciate how forwarding a voicemail might be identifying. However, I know that on our phones, which I love, I don't have to look at voicemails anymore. It records them and punches them out. So maybe there's a way for us to take a transcription. You probably already thought of that, but I was just going to offer that. Other than that, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you for the feedback. Very much appreciated. That's immediately where my thought went. If it's not the voice, then it can at least be a transcription. So happy to take that back. Thank you. And again, happy to take the feedback regarding the committee. The terms of reference have not yet been established, so I will happily incorporate that feedback into the terms of reference. I wanted to take a moment to highlight the use of accessory structures that is proposed through this bylaw. And when I say accessory structures, I mean yurts, bunkies, buildings that are accessory to the use of a primary building. Our zoning bylaw permits this. The building code also speaks to regulations that are associated with the erection of these non-traditional uses. And you'll see that there, as they must be built in compliance with both of those regulations. The number of those accessory structures is also determined through the planning process and through the building process. And not only that, is reliant upon the capacity of the septic system. So while we may not outright say bunkies are permitted, they are permitted through this proposed licensing structure. And with that, we'll get into our fees. These fees were determined through the working group last year. They remain unchanged. I am proposing that these fees be built into the fees and charges bylaw that is reviewed on an annual basis. These are kind of our starting point. The goal is to eventually have this program become cost neutral so that it is not a tax-based funded venture. So eventually, and depending on the buy-in we see for this program, we may have to amend these fees, but these are where we're starting per the recommendations of the community group in 2023. Questions about the fees? No? Okay. And that brings us to our timeline. Before I finish off, because this is my last slide, I did want to take some time to review the enforcement section that our delegates did raise some concerns with. The township, while we are able to, within our bylaw, provide proactive enforcement, we traditionally do not, simply because we do not have the resources to do so. So our bylaw enforcement officer acts primarily on a reactionary basis, meaning a complaint must be submitted in order for enforcement activities to arise. While we have built in the ability for a bylaw enforcement officer to attend a property, that is not done so in the absence of informing the property owner that we are doing so. It is explicitly written into the Municipal Act that you do have to provide notice prior to entering someone's property. So I don't want our delegates to leave here this evening thinking we will enter their premises, remove things, or demand things in the absence of notice and in the absence of formal writing. And I'm just trying to think of the other point I wanted to make. It'll come to me. And in addressing our timeline, so as communicated to you in April, you'll notice we are on schedule to have this done for September. I am recommending that this bylaw come back in September for final ratification. The licensing program will be ready to go by then, and then we can begin intaking applications for the 2025 season. And with that, that's everything I wanted to highlight with our program. And to our delegates this evening, I'm very happy to have a separate meeting with both of you to run through your concerns and see if we can make amendments to the bylaw. As I say, we have the whole summer to do so prior to it coming back in September. I recognize I didn't answer all of your questions, but I'm happy to answer any more if there is.
Thank you, Brittany, for that. A great presentation. Mayor Carlton.
Thank you. Just one that Heather had commented on was in section 9, item X or 10, about no person shall, while occupying or operating an STRA, contravene any bylaw of the Township of Georgian Bluffs or any provincial or federal statutes or regulations or orders made pursuant to the foregoing. I think it should be noted that in all of those items that we have in this bylaw, that many of them are ones that will legally need to be there simply for risk and liability issues. It's not that we think our owners are going to try and contravene any laws. It's that we simply have to have things like that there for our own protection.
Thank you. And that was the last point I wanted to make that I couldn't think of. So thank you for taking the words literally out of my mouth. When I say we created this highly in collaboration with our legal team, that is exactly what I mean. We are operating on the basis that our operators have been operating for some time. I personally, and I know the township does not wish to make life harder for anyone involved. We're simply operating on the basis of protecting the health and safety of the community. A good foundation for any bylaw to be written from is wide applicability, meaning if we make the regulations too specific, it then ties our hands when we have an issue that arises. So depending on the building code, the township zoning bylaw, the Provincial Offences Act, depending on those pieces of legislation to lay the foundation for our bylaw is the best way to approach any bylaw scenario, any written bylaw scenario. So a lot of the legalese that is incorporated into this bylaw is that to give us the foundation for enforcement, especially through the court system.
Thanks, Brittany. Councillor Colburn.
I just wanted to thank Brittany for all the work that she's done on this. I know this is not an easy file and it's a huge project. I also appreciate the fact that you have used input from our community members, our committee members, our bylaw enforcement officer, probably planning and building and all the rest of it. So it is a comprehensive and complex policy. I think we're going to have some growing pains, and I think that's okay. We're not going to get it perfectly right the first year, but we always have the option to go back and fix things up as needed ongoing. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you for all the work you've done on that, Brittany, and others.
Thanks, Councillor Colburn. Good comments. All right, further questions? Oops, so Brittany, go ahead.
Sorry, can I just make a couple more comments? Juan gave me a couple comments that I can address really quickly. The first is how long will the appeal process take? While we haven't mapped it out exactly, it will depend on the availability of the appeals committee. That will be the only hang up, and I personally don't see why it should take any longer than calling the committee and having them consider the decision. Second is the license reinstated on appeal. It may be, depending on the decision of the appeals committee. That is their decision. It is only their decision. Third, encourage township to use the 2-year data to review value of place. Okay, fair enough. Yes. Thank you, Juan.
Councillor Day.
Very quick question, coming from the fact that I've never heard this word used in council before. Tribunal. Is there anything I need to know about tribunals other than that the decision is final compared to a committee?
That's the foundation of it, meaning they're a completely separate body. They're not a committee of council. They are a third party entity at arm's length, as municipalities like to use. Quasi judicial, our clerk just threw out. That's a good word.
All right, further questions from anybody? Oh, no, go ahead.
Yes, through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, two comments briefly, very briefly to add to Mr. Drury's conversation just there. So we spent a lot of time, and I always as you all know, I'm a glass half full kind of a guy. And so I will stress that we spent a lot of time talking tonight about the penalties, the punitive measures, the suspensions, the terminations, tribunals, and so on and so forth. Last year, with all the effort we did, we had 7 complaints, all of which would have been addressed without any demerit point systems needing to be triggered. Thus far this year, we've had 2 phone calls, which prove the system's working because the issue was dealt with promptly. So the reality is we may never get to demerit points if we have a year like we did last year. We may never get close to having a tribunal needing to be set up. That's not to say that we shouldn't have those processes sketched out in the first place, but I don't think we're going to have a tribunal being convened every week throughout the summer. It's going to be infrequent rather than common. So that's the first one. The second comment, I did just want to come briefly back to something that Councillor Moore-Coburn mentioned in her question in regards to complaints. So yes, I think there are some things we can take away in terms of the voicemail recording, as Councillor Thompson indicated just there. I did just want to quickly come back to the point that complaints cannot be made anonymously. And the reason that complaints cannot be made anonymously is ultimately we rely on the courts to justify and investigate complaints, and we may require to call on. So at some point, any complaint made may ultimately result in somebody having to appear in court. The vast majority of complaints the township receives on any of its bylaws are settled long before we get to a courtroom, and so that anonymity does not need to be given up at any point in time. But that's the reason why complaints cannot ultimately be anonymous. But having said that, I think Councillor Thompson highlighted a good way we might be able to get through the voice recording issue.
Thank you, Noel, for those comments, for sure. All right, one last time, any further comments from anyone? So this is the draft bylaw that we have in place here. I've already had a mover and a seconder. I need to call the vote now. There's no more discussion. Call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. Great. Thank you. Long discussion on that one, board. It's good. All right, back to development and infrastructures. We are at 9.1.1 DEV 2024-037 backyard poultry update and bylaw. Recommendation reads that council receives staff report DEV 2024-037 backyard poultry update zoning bylaw for information, and that staff be directed to present an amendment to the township zoning bylaw 2020-020 to permit backyard poultry as permitted use on certain residential properties within the township for adoption at a future meeting. Need mover and seconder. Councillor Coburn, Councillor Day. We're going to go to Michael for this.
Thank you, Chair Pringle. I'm just waiting my document to open here on my computer, so I'm going to wing it a little bit while it's going on it. Unintended, but just throw that in there. So earlier this year, council was presented with the option of preparing a backyard poultry bylaw for the township, and staff went away with that and came back with an initial draft of the bylaw. And earlier, last couple months, still waiting for my documents to open here. So then at that initial draft of the bylaw, there were a number of matters that were asked to be put into the bylaw concerning or the uses surrounding backyard poultry, the type of chicken coops and runs that would be employed in the use of the backyard poultry, and also some matters dealing with disposal of waste from backyard poultry. So staff took those points into consideration and included them in the updated bylaw that you have this evening for your consideration.
Thank you, Michael. Questions from council? Mayor Carl?
Just a question about the zoning. So anyone who's in an agricultural or a rural zone already is not included in this bylaw. They already can have chickens as of right?
That's partially correct. Any property that is zoned agricultural or rural that is larger than 0.8 hectares or essentially 2 acres is allowed to keep livestock on their property. Livestock under those provisions would include poultry of any kind. So they are allowed to keep chickens.
So just to follow up to that then, when I was looking at the zoning map in the township, some areas are marked as restricted rural. Are those classified the same as the rural, or is there a difference?
To Deputy Mayor, the restricted rural has different provisions in terms of lot coverage and setbacks and that sort of thing. I believe the uses are still very similar, so they still could have livestock on those areas.
Nope, any further questions? I did have one question for you. Out of the residential, we're saying 2 acre lot size to have in residential. What would be the percentage in our township that would be a 2 acre lot in a residential area? How many would have a 2 acre lot? Can't be many.
To Deputy Mayor, I would say in the residential zoned lands that are not rural or agricultural, it would be very few. There are some. Typically, our residential zones are shoreline residential, or the residential zones we see in our settlement markets. And in those zones, typical lot size is 0.4 hectares, 1 acre, or smaller. There are some areas, say in the Brook area, that are larger than that, probably approaching the 2 acre, 8 hectare size. So there are some in those residential areas, but certainly dropping that size down to what do we have in the bylaw here? Just bear with me a second. Sorry. Certainly dropping that size 0.2. So 0.2 hectares, which is about 1/2 acre, does hit a good number of the residential lots that are not serviced. So they're still in that kind of a semi-rural environment, but they are smaller lots. So you'll see lots in the Oxford area, that size. Some of the larger lots in Shallow Lake and the Kemmel areas, and some of the lots then in the Brook area, but nothing in, say, Bubble Beach or even down around the shoreline areas, Bobby Bay, stuff like that.
Great. Yeah, no, sorry, that was my mistake there. I guess, yeah, you did have in your theater now. Resident use the same lots, provided this minimum lot size exceeds 2 hectares. So they are definitely smaller lots, but still does cut down. You're not looking at a whole lot of Shallow Lake that could do it, or, that was my concern. You get into Kilsyth and you got small lots and no room to go. That's really my concern. So thanks for clarifying that for me. All right, further questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? It's carried. All right, 9.2 Community and Environmental Services, 9.2.1 CES 2024-014 Private Road Maintenance Grants. Recommendation reads that the policy CES 2024-01 be endorsed to support the creation of private road maintenance grant program, and that staff be directed to implement the program over the summer 2024, and that staff be directed to provide an update on uptake through the 2025 budget cycle. Need a mover and a seconder. Councilor Winters, Mayor Carlton, and we're going to go down for this report.
Recognizing we've had a fairly long evening, thank you, Deputy Mayor Pringle. I will keep my comments fairly open. I'm glad. Thank the delegate for approaching. We've had a number of residents from a number of different roads express interest in this one over the last few years, and indeed, council's had some good conversation in 2023 and through the budget cycle of 2024. So this is a grant program supported through the budget 2024 to provide support to residents that live on privately maintained roads. And there are a number of different types of those which the policy addresses. So if there are no agreements in place already whereby the township does something, so a no demand for service agreement, a limited service agreement, or as we have in one case, courtesy grading agreement with the previous township. So in absence of an agreement whereby the township is involved in that road, the private road grant basically allows for residents to apply for up to $5,000 once every 3 years towards a road, in the way in which we put the draft policy together. We've tried to keep this as simple, speaking a lot to the delegates' points earlier on this evening, we've tried to keep this as simple as possible. So all that we need is a simple application form. Tell us that you need something for your road. Tell us roughly how much you think it will cost you, how you want to get it done. Give us a photo of the road, go away, get the work done, get some invoicing together to show us that you spent the money, send us a photo to show us that you've done the work, and then you'll get back that grant. We expect that the grant can be processed very quickly, turned around in a matter of probably days in most instances, and certainly less than a couple of weeks, and keeping it as simple as we possibly can. If you're eligible, you will get the money up until the point at which the budget runs out. If you need $1,000, apply for $1,000. If you need $5,000, apply for $5,000. We will then, when you've done the work, submit us the invoices, and we'll pay out either the grant or the amount that you spent, whichever is the lesser of the two. We've kept the category of eligible works fairly broad. This can be as simple as a load of gravel that you place at the side of the road and then residents make use of throughout the year to slowly but surely fill in potholes. It could be a comprehensive regrading. It could be ditching, could be brushing back. It could be a contract for seasonal winter maintenance if that's something that you would wish to put that money against. So in terms of timelines, we would open up the grant system in April of each year. That's on the basis that we will probably have got through budget by April of each year. And so we'll have a budget set aside. First past the post gets the money through the amount of grant we have available. So this time round, we have $20,000, which council put towards it, which means if we had maximum applications, then we would be able to get through 4 $5,000 grants this year. But if people put in $1,000 grants, then we would be able to get through 20 of them. And so that's basically it. You meet the eligible criteria, we will confirm that you can get the grant. You have up to 18 months to do the work. In many instances, we anticipate that this is as simple as getting a load of gravel delivered, perhaps bringing a contractor with a piece of equipment to spread that gravel out. In other instances, it may be a little bit more complex. So, for example, if you needed to replace a culvert on a road, it is possible you may need to approach the Conservation Authority, seek approval for that. You may need to do some extra work in terms of design. And so the 18-month window allows for a community to approach something which may be a little bit more complicated and may have a slightly longer planning horizon for it, and know that they can get that grant money at the back end. So in essence, we put together this grant process, very, very simple. All that is needed to justify the work is the signatures of 3 people. So one person has the idea, they get 2 of their neighbors to support the idea. Have 3 people that sign off on the application process, and then a signatory, as was a petition, as was indicated earlier on, just to show broad support for it. 60% of the owners, there's no limit on the number of owners that can, the number of people that live on a road, as long as there are more than 3 municipally addressed properties that use that as their primary point of access, the road is eligible. So we've tried to keep it as simple, as quick, and as easy to apply for and to get, so that we can actually allow residents to have the support they would need in terms of moving forward private road maintenance projects. So quite happy to answer any questions and cover off any that I may not have covered or the policy may not address that the delegate asked earlier on.
Thanks, Alan, for that presentation there, and hopefully you've got the questions answered for the gentleman at the back there. I see heads nodding, so that is good. Councillor Day.
Thank you. Two questions, one really fast, I think, to answer, and the other possibly more complicated. The due date for applications is April 1st, and there's also the mention of this year when it's clearly past April. So is it possible to have this applied in 2024, or are we seeing 2025?
Absolutely possible through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, absolutely possible. And it would be staff's intention to apply it this year. Council has awarded budget towards this programme this year. So the date that this would open would be the date that you approve the policy. So in theory, that could be as soon as next Wednesday. If we need to go back and make some changes, then probably into July.
Go ahead.
The second question, I've been pondering the groups of 3 or more property owners. And I've been thinking this through and thinking that maybe some roads there are 3 families or properties would be a large percentage of the people who need that road as use that road as their primary access. On the other hand, there may be other places where that is a small proportion of the number of properties down that road. Do we need to consider, and given what we heard about improving road quality, which then increases speeding, have we taken into consideration that possibly, just to use that same philosophy you mentioned earlier about taking all possible scenarios into consideration, have we taken into consideration the possibility that some people may not want their road improved while others on the road do?
So through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, you are indeed right. These are important questions and slightly longer to answer than the first one. There's 2 steps to the complete application. So the first step is at least 3 owners have to sign off on it to say they're basically saying this is good work, but 60% of the residents that use that road as their primary access also need to acknowledge that they're aware that an application is being submitted, and there's a form that we've put together for residents to take around and get those signatures. So yes, we are looking for 3 people who are principally going to be accountable for the grant. The 60% of residents really does mean that we're looking for the majority of residents on that private access, that privately maintained road, to be in support of work being done towards the improvement and being aware that there is work being done and an application is being made. The other reason for that is we don't want 3 residents at one end of the road to apply and then 3 residents in the middle end of the road and 3 residents at the far end of the road to all apply, and it be 15,000 to go to toward one road. So there were 2 reasons for putting that caveat in, including the one that you've just highlighted. The other one is, and you just indicated that there may indeed be some people that aren't in support, and so that 60% means that you then get over that majority point, and so you may have the 40%. Say in a road where there are 10, you could have 4 owners that are concerned with that approach, and that is a community issue for the community of residents that share the road to have to deal with, and the township is always happy to try and facilitate those conversations as best we can. The other thing I note in here is that some of the privately maintained roads which this grant would be applicable to are privately owned. They're not actually municipal owned rights of way, they are privately owned roads. And so in addition to the 60% and in addition to the 3, if you are doing work on land which is privately owned, you also have to have the signature of the person whose land you are working on. So you have to have the specific approval of the person on whose land you are working as well.
You can follow up there, Councillor. Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Well, my question was about, I was going to wait to see if anybody else had to go because I'm curious about my colleagues. They have more experience than I do, but my question is about road allowances. So are we including road allowances in this? Like it's referred to, but it confused me. It said it includes road allowances, but only those that are road crosses. I don't understand that. You mean crosses or crosses mean goes along?
process then goes along through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle. So this does include road allowances. In fact, the delegate this morning, earlier on this evening, was speaking to a road which is in a municipally owned road allowance. It's an unassumed road allowance, so it is municipal property. It is owned by us, but it is not operated by us.
So that's my question. So don't we have, I think we have several where we have road allowances where people may want to say, well, they'll improve it, but we're actually encouraging other traffic to go down. So like whether that's side by sides, four-wheelers, snowmobiles, everything else, what happens in that case?
So do you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, we don't have any of those. If it is an unassumed road allowance, we do not encourage use of it. Use may occur, but that would be not encouraged by the municipality.
Okay.
Do you have a specific road?
No, maybe not.
Okay.
Thank you. Mayor Carlton.
So kind of two things. Number one, Mr. Skinner had a full list of questions. I wonder if staff can bring that up and just make sure all of his questions have been answered, because I'm not sure they have. There's some that I saw on there about being able to use volunteers and having them paid for it. I think that's addressed in the report, and I don't know that that needs to be answered here tonight. If staff could just connect with him and make sure those get answered properly. The other is, you mentioned winter maintenance, that it could be used for that, but I'm understanding you can only apply for work on a road once every 3 years. So a group such as Mallard Street couldn't apply for winter maintenance every year, but they might be able to use it 1 year.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, you're quite correct. So in that sort of instance, theoretically, the 18-month window would allow. So, for example, you could put out a contract for 2 or 3 years of winter maintenance, and as long as that work is invoiced before the end of the 18 months, we would still honor it. So there are ways. Again, as I said, we have tried to be as open to supporting residents rather than trying to be too prescriptive to restrict. So the intention here is to try and support rather than to try and restrict. If we find we are inundated, we will be coming back to the council to ask for more budget to support this, or council can restrict the grant by perhaps lowering the amount that is awarded each time so that more people get a slice of the pie. There are a number of different ways. I am quickly looking through Mr. Skinner's grants questions. First come, first serve. Yes, it's basically if you meet the eligibility, you will get the money if the budget is there. Timeline is 18 months. Approval is by photos and staff, and so very quick. So photos before, photos after. In a very, very rare instance, it might be necessary for staff to pop out and have a quick look, but I don't imagine that will be the case. Generally speaking, once we pass the approval through, we should be able to pay those grants out within the month. That tends to be the way our accounts payable tends to work. Is it possible to submit the cost of workers? Absolutely, where they're contractors. We are not going to reimburse the cost of volunteer time. However, if you've got staff, got residents who are able to operate equipment and machinery, if they are renting equipment and machinery, we will obviously pay for the rental cost. That would be an eligible cost. If not using the full budget allowed in one season time, is it possible to utilize the full budget throughout different seasons? Yes, as long as your application covers it. We're not going to pay out any more than the application, and again that 18-month timeline, and I'm quite happy to see what comes from that. Community individual, it's an individual that will be responsible for it, but the 3 signatures will support it, and the 60% is required. Size of community has no bearing on the amount of money, and the reason for that is there may be several residents live on a relatively small section. There may be a small number of residents that live on a relatively large section. So number of residents does not necessarily determine. Slush fund. Slush fund is a useful word. An example of where the grant is not meant to be too prescriptive. So an example of where a slush fund could be, or a contingency. So for example, if you know you have a gravel road which doesn't need full re-graveling, but you would like to have a pile of gravel available so that you can repair it as needed as the season wears on, that would be eligible. You can have a pile of gravel and then use that over the course of 18 months or 2 years to fill in potholes and undertake that work on and off. Likewise, for tree trimming, Reimbursement would be a photo to us. We'll pass it on and you'll get a check in the mail.
Thanks, Niall. Councillor Thompson.
So I think I heard it's first past the post, not number. It's hard to use, like, I'm trying to use a real example, right? So if we go first past the post, like take an example, like I'm gonna just name it, like Shepherd's Lake. Shepherd's Lake has, I'll guess and get it wrong, 50, 60 something people that live down that road, and they've carried the freight on that for, I don't know, however many long years it is. So I would predict they're going to apply for this grant. So if they go in, if they get in on April 3rd, April 4th, they're probably too late. If 3 people on a road get in for it and they're going to get it ahead of that, like we're not going to apply a best benefit or most benefit for the dollar. It is first past the post.
Yeah, through your Deputy Mayor Pringle, yes, that's exactly how we're working it. So the intention would be on the proposal, the policy that we put forward would be on April the 1st in a standard year. If council have approved, say 20,000, the first 4 applicants past midnight on April the 1st would use their date stamp on the email to prove it. The first 4 past the post on April the 1st would get, if they all applied for 5,000, they're the first 4, and number 5 doesn't get anything that year. That's one of the reasons why we put in the caveat that you can only apply for it once every 3 years. Calculating up the number of roads, that means that everybody has an opportunity to get 5,000 roughly every 3 years. So if you worked it out, there are probably 12 to 15 roads to which this grant is applicable to. So there we have our 3-year cycle. And that's roughly where we worked it out. As I say, if we're finding we meet undue pressure, then we can come back to council and ask for money. Our hope will be that residents will only ask for what they need, which means that hopefully we can get through far more roads than that on a time-by-time basis. It will take some catch-up for everybody to get a piece of the pie, so to speak. But the first past the post means that nobody is sitting in judgment trying to work out whether one road is more eligible than another. The point is, all our privately road maintained residents are taxpayers of the township of Georgian Bluffs and maintain the road in front of their house. We're not trying to say one is more deserving than any other.
Follow up? Oh, okay, very good. Yep, go ahead, Councillor Winters.
You didn't think I was going to be quiet, did you? First of all, I want to congratulate staff. I mean, this is a long time coming. I think this is very important for the people that we've heard from that live on these unmaintained, unopened roads. I appreciate that the fact that we're keeping it simple. I think that's important. First to the table, I mean, I get that as well. Where I struggle is I think there's more roads than we anticipate there is. And the $5,000, when I read this and I look at it and I've talked to a couple of constituents, only allowing you there once every 3 years may be problematic. When we look at the root of all of this was, we'd like a load of gravel, we'd like a little courtesy grading, we want that. And I want to be careful that we're not promoting development of these roads with $5,000. Is it there for, I'd like 3 loads of gravel, 1 to fill potholes, 1 to sit there for the winter months. I'd like to bring a grader in once or twice a year. 5,000 seems excessive for that. Or if we actually reduce the amount of the duration from 3 years to say 2 years, we went from 5,000, whether that's 2,500 or 3,000. We're going to get more of a feel that first year of what this program is going to do. Hopefully we get more people interested. But I don't think our goal is to say, hey, let's start paving, let's start putting culverts in. I mean, these are unmaintained, unopened road allowances. The drive behind this was, I'd like a load of gravel, I'd like some courtesy grading. So when I look at it, I applaud you for simplicity. I applaud you for, the speed at which we do. I think 20,000 as a council is a great number to start with. And just for me personally, I'm a little hung up on the 3-year time frame, the 5,000. Yes, everybody could use 5,000, don't get me wrong. But up until this date, they've been doing it themselves. But I think we need to spread it out to show a little bit more unity. Last thing you want to do is be selling coffee and donuts at 12:01 on April the 1st to see who's sitting at their email. And the CEO and I have had a conversation about township providing courtesy, and I respect why we're not including that. There's a liability when you actually use your own forces and things like that. I get that. So I think this is very good. It's just I throw that comment out there that maybe the 3-year application time may be a little excessive. Maybe the 5,000 in year 1 is a little excessive.
Thanks. Councilor Winters. Councilor Thompson.
I think you're right, and I think you're gonna find more than 12 roads. And then, so my concern was, I think we included municipal road allowances, so then are people gonna do work on our property? I think we're gonna find, we'll see where it goes, but I think there's many more than 12, and I think it's gonna become problematic. So what happens if somebody gets hurt on doing something on one of the roads that we own? I don't know, I guess we'll find out.
Yep.
I think where I got concerned was I was in on private roads, but then when it morphed to, I think, road allowances, I started to get a little bit more nervous.
Oh.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I'm going to try and bat both yours and Councillor Winters off here. The majority of these are on municipal road allowances and have been on municipal road allowances forever. So the vast majority of the roads that are used as privately owned, privately maintained roads already sit on municipal property. That liability has been a liability the township has been exposed to since pre-amalgamation. So I would suggest the liability of this grant is no more or less, because we're actually asking for some assurances around the insurance and capability of individuals to undertake the work. The 5,000 once every 3 years. If council has a mindset for a different number and a different duration, I think we can make that happen very quickly. So if we were to say go to a $2,000 grant every 2 years, we could easily make that happen. We could $2,000 every year would mean 10 roads theoretically each year without a budget impact, and certainly becomes the same sort of dollar value. But 10 and 2,000 every 2 years would get us to potentially 40 roads in the first 2 years. So if council has a number and can agree that number, I think that would be something that could be implemented administratively between now and the passing of this council next week. If there's more holistic digging that we need to do, then it might take a little bit longer.
So part of the way I read that report was that residents on a road could apply for up to $5,000. So I guess when I read that, I was thinking if somebody just needed a load of gravel or a grading, maybe they're talking 2,000 and we could do upwards of 10 roads. And I think with that kind of mindset, is it worth just seeing where it goes this year and revisit the whole program at budget time? We'll have a better idea of how many have applied, what the need is, and then we can tweak it going forward to another year.
I would be in agreement with the mayor on that one also there. See where it goes after the first year, and we're obviously going to oversee the program anyway. We're going to go out and all of a sudden somebody wants to go out there and put a load of gravel on, and all of a sudden they want to brush the whole side of the road. They want to do a bunch of work that's going to maybe be over the scope or what they need to do the first 3 years. But I think if we see where it goes, should be see where it ends up and go from there. So, Councilor Coburn.
I don't have strong preferences one way or the other, but I am leaning towards Councillor Thompson and Winters' suggestion that maybe we do look at less, as Niall has suggested, 2,000 and every 2 years. I guess I'm thinking when you offer people 5,000, the tendency is for them to find a way to spend $10,000. And if that's the case, and I predict it likely will be, then there's less left over for the other folks. So I would rather err on the side of making more grants available to more roads rather than being more restrictive in the first year as we give this a shot.
Thanks, Councilor Coburn. Do you need us to make an amendment to the motion here then? So if somebody want to put an amendment on the floor there that we can discuss? Has anybody got a Rick or Councilor Winters?
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, my only concern before I put the amendment on the floor is that if we had said today, let's try this and then let's tweak it next year. I would hate to see, somebody apply this year, get 3-year penalty, and next year we tweak it and you're disadvantaged or you're not advantaged. I think that's, we can't lose sight of that. But I would certainly put a motion on the floor that, and my motion would be that, maximum of $2,500 for a 2-year duration.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councilor Coburn? All right, discussion? Yeah, I'll call the vote on the amended motion. All those in favor? That is carried. We'll go back to the main motion, for a vote on the main motion. Any discussion? Not seeing any discussion. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that is carried. All right. Thanks, Mal. All right, on to our, I do believe we're on to our last one here. 9.3.2 COR 2024-024 Legislative Service Resource. Recommendation reads that council approve the addition of a 0.5 FTL full-time equivalent staff position as Legislative Services Coordinator, and that the 0.5 FTE Legislative Services Coordinator be funded by the approved short-term accommodation budget in 2024, and that the 2025 base budget address the future costs of this position. Need a mover and a seconder. McCarroll, Councillor Thompson, we're going to go to Brittany.
Thank you, and I will attempt to be brief in considering I have already taken a lot of your time this evening. As indicated in the report, our Legislative Services Division has seen ample growth in all of their existing responsibilities, and with the addition of the short-term accommodations portfolio, that will add some demand. But as elaborated in the report, that demand lays well beyond that of the short-term accommodations portfolio. That is simply an additional reason to justify additional support in our Legislative Services Department. Our township has always struggled and faltered with records management programs. Records management programs are a mandated requirement throughout the province. And not only that, it also bolsters our responsibility to maintain open data and open governance. So from a personal point, I have held every position that is spoken to in this report. And in doing so, can personally speak to the demands that are on every position that is spoken to. And adding to the demand that is already existing is simply not feasible in the absence of additional resources. The OPP resource presents us with a unique opportunity to simply bolster a 0.5 FTE rather than build in a full-time FTE. I have recommended that the portion of budget that is required to welcome this position be allocated from the STA line. We still have plenty of budget that can cover that for this year. And in moving forward, it would form part of your future year base budgets. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Brittany. Questions from the council? I am not seeing any questions. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? That's carried. All right, unfinished business, nil. New business, nil. Sorry. But we discussed it. All right, sorry, Councillor Coburn. All right, we are on the new business discussion from Councillor Coburn, and I'll let Councillor Coburn have the floor.
Thank you. And this doesn't need to be a long discussion, hopefully, but I just wanted to let council know that the strategic planning date for November, where we talk about budget, was decided upon with those present at the June 12th, I believe it was, council meeting, which I was absent for. And unfortunately, then I didn't have the opportunity to say that the date chosen is a date that I cannot commit to. So I'm trying not to feel like I'm being sidelined, but this would be the second year in a row that I would not be able to attend that particular meeting. Because it doesn't fit with my schedule. So I know I've asked in the past that when we set important meeting dates like this, that we send out a doodle poll. For me, that works really well, but I understand from some comments I've heard that it doesn't necessarily work all that well for staff because not everyone on council responds to those polls, which is unfortunate. But surely there can be a way that we can put dates out there that we can find for all of our members to be there. We have a small council, and when it's an important meeting like budget planning as part of our strategic planning, I would hope that we would want all hands on deck. So I'm asking for council's reconsideration of that November date. I think it's the 22nd, so that I might be able to attend this year. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councilor Coburn. All right. Oh, Mayor Carlton.
Just a question of staff. How did we arrive at that date? I thought it was sent out asking council members for availability and the dates, but maybe I'm missing something because I thought that had been done.
I can answer that. We did do an initial poll at the beginning of the year and then ask for vacation schedules as well. There was a November date included in that original poll that the bulk of council could not do. We are tied to a November date. That date was simply selected based on the availability through vacation schedules that was provided. And I apologize, Councillor Coburn, I do recognize that you were on vacation that day. I will echo Councillor Coburn's comments, if I may, that finding a day that works with 7 people's schedules is just never an easy feat. So we do try to do so to best ensure quorum. So I apologize to those that are unavailable on the days that we call these meetings. And I really do try to accommodate everyone to the best of our abilities in doing so. So if November 22nd isn't the date, we're okay with that as long as we can commit to a day in November, just so we're not holding up the budget cycle this year.
Thanks for those comments. So I'm looking for suggestions then on a date possible. Is that where we want to go? We'd have to cancel the November 22nd meeting to do that. Just looking for suggestions where we go from here. There's a date that's available to people or whatever. I make work whatever comes around myself. So anybody got comments? Oh, Councilor Coburn.
I would just ask that we look at I'm hearing that staff are perhaps looking at something earlier rather than later. Is there a date in the earlier part of November, the first 2 weeks of November, that would work for everyone? We're sort of already committed to being around those dates as opposed to the last week where we don't have a council meeting scheduled. So it's just that 1 week in November that I typically do take vacation, and that's the week of the 16th through the 23rd that I'd be away. Other than that, I'm pretty flexible.
Speaking just for myself, November is far enough away that I can work around whatever happens in November. It will just be a day I have to take off from my other job.
Thank you. Councilor Winters?
I'm flexible. Whatever day in November comes up, I can make myself available.
Yep. Okay. Councilor Thompson? I'm also flexible for whatever needs to be in November. It's far enough away I can look after it.
I'm off the 4th to the 8th. The other days, it's impossible for me to say. There may be a way. If I can't come, I can't come, but I won't know the date now. So I'm not tied to the date picked, but the week I'm on holidays is the 4th to the 8th.
Good. Thank you. Mayor Carlton?
So I too had a conflict on the 22nd and was going to have to call on somebody else to cover for me and something. I think the point I was trying to make was that we were arriving at a date that met the majority of council, and with 5 people in council already working full time, it becomes really difficult to get everybody together. And so I think, I mean, we can try for another date, but I would acknowledge that we are probably not going to get all of council on hand for any one date.
If it's helpful, I could float a couple. No? Okay.
Discussion going on here, Councilor Coburn. What's it?
In our discussions over here, in looking at the budget schedule that you'll see next month, we would propose the 12th. So that would be a Tuesday.
Counselor Colburn's good. Counselor Winters, good. Counselor Day,
Absolutely fine. Just worried that we also are still missing a council member while we're
Right.
making this decision. So I regret that we made the mistake once and would hate to make the mistake twice.
Counselor Thompson,
I think that Dave makes a good point. I have nothing that prevents me on the 12th right now.
Counselor, or sorry, Mayor Carlin.
Yeah, about being counselor. I have two other things already on that day, but I can probably switch something around. I'm wondering, can we switch to a doodle poll, pick 2 or 3 dates? There are 2 days in the month that I don't have a dot on in my calendar. That's the 21st and the 25th. But
So-
otherwise, I'll be switching something around.
Yes. So in fairness to Counselor Schuldice, I think if we could come up with 2 dates in a doodle poll, go with the majority. Can't make it, you can't make it, but as long as we got quorum.
Fair enough. We'll take it back.
Okay. All right. Do we need to do any more here then, Carly? Okay. So we need a motion then to look forward to a new date, Counselor Day.
I move that we direct staff to pick and to propose a new date for the meeting.
Date, yes.
Yes, propose options for the new meeting.
Okay, got a mover, got a seconder. Counselor Winters, discussion? Oh,
Nope.
you're good? Thank you. You want a question? Oh, you're. I'm not there yet. All right, yeah, so, got the motion on the floor and more discussion. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. Okay, we are moving into closed session. The committee of the whole moved into closed session at 7:25 PM in the council chambers. The CEO, deputy CAO, director of corporate services, manager of legislative services, the clerk, bylaw enforcement officer, and legal counsel remaining in the floor to discuss advice, 13.1 advice that is subject to a solicitor client privilege, including communications necessary for the purpose of open meeting exemption F of section 239-2 of the Municipal Act 2001 property matter. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Day, Councillor Thompson. Discussion. No discussion. We'll call the vote. All those in favor? You're going into closed session. All right, we're back in open session here. Council moved into closed session under open meeting exemption F of section 239-2 of the Municipal Act 2001. As a result of closed session discussion, direction was given to staff. Date of our next council meeting is July the 3rd, 2024 at 5 p.m. Committee of the whole is July the 10th, 2024 at 5 p.m. If there is no further business, I will now call for an adjournment. Need to move for in a seconder. Councillor Thompson,